Thank you for coming out to our second local conversation of Strong Towns Steubenville. Some of you may be familiar with what Strong Towns is. Some of you may have never heard of it before. Well, Strong Towns is bigger than just us and what we're doing here in Steubenville. It is a national nonprofit which is dedicated to civic revitalization through grassroots efforts. It's been around in some capacity for 15 years. Originally started out as a civil engineer writing a blog about how unsustainable suburban infrastructure is and the various communal and cultural effects that it has. And it's now become a fully recognized national nonprofit that is mainly a media advocacy organization to help citizens in particular. You don't need to be a city planner, you don't need to be an engineer, you just need to be an engaged citizen. Help citizens get equipped with the tools to help make their place the place that they want. And so they have local conversations organically as this group was developing. People just started implementing the Strong Towns principles in their towns. And so I've been in Steubenville for a little over 2 years. I guess I said you didn't have to be a civil engineer, but I'm a civil engineer. So through my studies indirectly, I started coming across this material and find it incredibly convicting on how we can best better our cities, a very holistic approach to it. And so I was able to bring some people together. And this is our second public meeting that we're having now. We have identified a few of those Strong Towns principles that are our local conversation we want to focus on. And the one that we're focusing on tonight with this presentation is civic and neighborhood pride. Steubenville has a long history, and I will let our presenters talk about it. But there is a diverse amount of history within our town. And I think for whatever revitalization we want to see, we need to understand what has come before us. What are the memories, what are the institutions in the neighborhoods that have historically been here that we ourselves find ourselves in. And so I'm going to stop talking and let people who've been doing some research on this topic show some really cool stuff. You'll be hearing from Kevin Bernetsky. Kevin is a recent graduate from Franciscan University. He studied history there and moved with his family 5 years ago. Moved with his family 5 years ago. They live in Spawns Division. You might not know where that is, you'll learn tonight. Jamie Nugent is an intern with the Harmonium Project. He is finishing up a doctorate in history in Belfast, Ireland. And he's helped with the Strong Towns work while he's here. So the two of these gentlemen have been doing research, and we'll get to present that to you tonight. And then we'll not just talk about the history of our neighborhoods, but we'll be able to have breakout discussions to talk about the futures as well. So without further ado, Kevin and Jamie.
Okay, thanks everybody. Thank you for allowing Strong Towns Steubenville to present you with a proposal, a history, on how to engage with the history of the city, enhance civic pride, increase neighborhood cohesion, and create a sense of place in Steubenville's many different places. Kevin and I will briefly explain the history of Steubenville's development, chart the course of its economy and culture, and summarize how we ended up where we are today. We will finish by proposing for a discussion on Steubenville's civic revival, one neighborhood at a time. Steubenville has, just the first one, come a long way from a small township nestled in the natural amphitheater on the banks of the Ohio. First purchased and laid out by James Ross and Bezaleel Wells in 1797. But in many ways, the development pattern of the city has hardly changed. Ross and Wells were pioneers and speculators in equal measure, planning out, that is to say, there's a term in city planning called platting, or plat, P-L-A-T, which is basically just a formal plan. So they platted out the city on this place called, hopefully now called the Original City. We probably know it as the 4th Street Commercial Historic District. They sold sections off to aspiring landowners and people who lived on the property as well. Almost immediately, there was a level of complexity in the town that required organization, and before long, Steubenville incorporated as a town in 1805. So its residents could talk about, decide how they wanted their town to develop in one forum. Access to the Ohio, proximity to Pittsburgh, meant that industry and commerce began to develop, requiring yet more decisions on how the town should look. So in 1851, the inhabitants decided to incorporate as a city. And lot by lot, parcel by parcel, the city developed. As you can see, you've got tiny little developers here, various names. Invisible to you now, but I can illuminate some of them. Small developers bought up land, erected buildings, sold off the finished development, growing the city one small bed at a time. A glance at the subdivision map of the original downtown will show this pattern of step-by-step development. Each block has a host of different names: Ross, Wells, Wallace, Fisher, Murray, Dickinson, Lucas, Brown, Anderson. All we have left are the names, sometimes the buildings that they left behind. But that's not all we have. We have also a story of aspiration, of small attempts to make the city a better place, and hopefully make a little bit of money out of it as well. Providing wealth, a sense of achievement, not just to the actual owners, but to their families and friends, so they can say they helped build up the city. At the turn of the 20th century, Steubenville already had its original city. Next one. But then we have the suburbs developing along the hills, the places we call Highland Avenue, Spring Avenue, La Belle Vue, the beautiful view, Pleasant Heights. In the 1920s onwards, new subdivisions began to develop along Market Street, now Sunset Boulevard, and the Hill, with bigger lots, larger streets, new governing ordinances for these planned developments, which, for example, restricted building heights and types, removed animals and agriculture, and even imposed minimum prices on new houses built in these subdivisions. The modern American suburb had come to Steubenville. It's been 100 years. Let's see how we did. Can you get the next one? So, as the city was growing, it acquired more land. In the west, in the east of the city by the river, that was 1851. 1871, it acquired the hillside lots, and it just kept growing and growing and growing. Little bits were acquired on sides, and there haven't been any annexations since 1970. Oh no, 1987 was the one up top, which Kevin will tell you more about later. So now, okay, so about the industry. The steel mills, the potteries, and the clothing manufacturers were in full swing as, little by little, the city acquired more and more land to the west to house Steubenville's aspiring middle class. Larger attractive homes and quieter neighborhoods, combined with the private automobile, offered a new beginning. Speculators jumped at the opportunity. Their efforts combined with the city acquiring more land to provide services for these new subdivisions: water, electricity. The new subdivisions were more homogeneous than the old, offering more cohesive neighborhood identities, yet also more space. A 1936 leaflet announced, "A drive through the city reveals many beautiful residential sections, block after block, of attractive modern dwellings in settings of flowers and shrubbery and well-kept lawns that reflect strong civic pride." In 1936, it was estimated that 40% of Steubenville's residents owned their own homes. 90 years on, it's even higher, 54%. So many of Steubenville's residents are deeply invested in this place and will be crucial to its revitalization. As we can see from this 2013 map, there are approximately 31 neighborhoods and subdivisions in Steubenville that the city recognizes, and probably even more in common usage. I would stress that this map is from the 2013 comprehensive plan. It is based on a 1981 engineering plan or sort of chart, so it's not necessarily completely representative of how the city works, but it's a pretty good measure, and we've used it as a guide to help us research the history of them. So Kevin and I were able to go down to the county courthouse, look at when the neighborhoods were first platted and planned out, and then when the first property sale was, so we have a rough idea of when they actually started to be lived in. We've been able to find out the history of most of these subdivisions, and I'll let Kevin tell you more about that.
Okay, so the first section we're going to be looking at is starting full west. This sectioning that we've got going is something Jamie and I devised, so it's not directly taken from anything, it's just how we're going to be forming our understanding going forward. So section 5, the west end of Steubenville. This part of the city is centered around the country club, which I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar with, which moved to Lover's Lane in the 1920s after a fire at the previous location in Alicante. Subdivisions here include Country Club Hills and Country Club Estates, Westwood, Parkdale, and Steeplechase, which Country Club Hills and Steeplechase have their own signage currently. The housing in the area resembles a very pleasant landscape park, gentle rises and spaced out housing units, interspersed with amenities such as schools and leisure centers, especially supporting a golf course, which you'll see if you're driving around Lover's Lane. Later on in the 80s, the Tri-States and Fort Steuben malls opened in this area to much publicity. And at one stage, the Fort Steuben Mall had over 80 units occupied with commercial space. However, as some of you may know, there's a large geological fault that was found in the mall, and generally the decline of malls across America meant that the vitality that animated the mall was slowly declining as well, and essentially disappeared, which left many wondering what the future of this part of Steubenville could be. I'm sure many of us are still asking this question right now, seeing as recent news about the mall, but moving on. Our next section, which we term the Central West, this part's girded by the John Scott Highway, named after a local Ohio senator. Its place names have a touch of California about them, though, as was popular at the time. Buena Vista, Hollywood, Sunset Hills, and of course Beverly Hills. They're all connected by the ubiquitous Sunset Boulevard. Two of the subdivisions not named after the West Coast destinations are named after two local dairymen, William Becker and John Spahn. Both came from Germany instead of successful milk delivery businesses before they embarked on the more lucrative real estate endeavors. Spahn himself also opened an ice cream shop, which still has a building location. This part of the city now hosts two key institutions as well, so remaining strong in this sense, which is the Trinity Health System, and of course Catholic Central High School. According to aerials from the 50s and local legend, the exclusive subdivision of Alexander Manor used to be a horse track in the old city. So Steubenville has had a few over the years of horse tracks, that is, including an area where Pleasant Heights and LaBelle now sit. Will it be Steubenville's last? All right, our next area is the second ring. This encompasses Wilrose Terrace, Hillcrest, Langley, Manhattan, and Grady Estates. Visitors to this part of Steubenville will mainly notice Hollywood Plaza with Kroger, big Dean Martin mural on that thing, as well as the Big Red Stadium, which was reconstructed in the 1930s. It's a very busy part of Steubenville, where most of the commerce has been moved over the years. It's nestled away from the bustle of the main commercial area are the second ring neighborhoods. These are the ones we're identifying today. Easily the most historic neighborhood would be the Brady Estates, named after James T. Brady. And the city of Steubenville identified in the 2013 comprehensive plan that this may be worth historic designation. Another interesting part of this was Wilrose Terrace, probably our most removed subdivision on the map. This is, again, established around the 1930s, around the industry that developed there. Another key area of note around Wilrose Terrace is what was formerly called Stanton Park. I'm not sure how many of us are familiar with this. This was a recent discovery of mine. This was termed in some of the books we've been reading as Steubenville's Disneyland. So this was a massively influential and popular, what's called the trolley park, because I don't know, many of you may know there was a trolley that ran through Steubenville up Market Street, so that was connecting much of the city. This was mainly accessible through this trolley, and so visitors who were artists and wealthy, notable people, and most of the social elite in Steubenville would come up here for days of leisure and fun. There was a beautiful historic park with a lake and trails. There was another racetrack. There was a skating rink. There was a roller coaster at one point. And as time went on and trends changed, there was also a casino. And there were dances held here. And generally a massive amount of tourism and commerce that brought people from all over. Of course, the death of the trolley, in a sense, and the rise of the automobile meant that trolley parks like this became less of interest as time went on, and so you see a slow decline in Stanton Park's popularity until only a few things remain. And then, of course, as time did wage its war, now all we have here is US Route 22 and 7. So that's what you'll find if you go to this location nowadays. But there was quite a lot to be done in Steubenville at this point, that I can assure you. Next section, the first ring of Steubenville, we're calling it. So this part represents the city's first suburbs outside the historic downtown, and it's very popular among many newcomers to the city. It's probably where a lot of their friends are staying. It's a very frequent place for new housing to be developed. Proximity and connection to the downtown and magnificent view of the Ohio make this very attractive to newcomers who want access to the original city, but also a space center to raise a family. With the exception of Lincoln Heights, a 1920s neighborhood, all these developments date back almost to the city's founding, as it is spread beyond the original boundaries up to the surrounding hills. The magnificent Beatty Park contains history and nature and connects Lincoln Valley to Pleasant Heights as well as Union Cemetery. So it's a central area where a lot of Steubenville's most notable places are connected. And then moving back down to section 1, downtown, or the original city, as we've been terming it. So this park has seen the most dramatic change over the years since the city's founding. So from the 1790s, when it was first established, to the boom of industry in the 19th and 20th century, the downtown has been the most obvious indicator or litmus test of the city's prosperity and where its population is now. Since Bezalel Wells first mapped out the streets and avenues that we now know, decades of businesses and institutions have shaped Steubenville's growth. Although far fewer people live in this part of Steubenville now, the North End Historic District is still one of the most attractive areas in which to live. Some of the nicest historic homes are still preserved there to this day. Unfortunately, the downtown has faced significant, been held back by many decades of underinvestment and significant decrease in economic development and social development. And the city is still bisected by two major railway lines which hamper future developments in a sense. One of the lines cuts the city off from what would be one of its most valuable amenities, which is of course the Ohio River. Like the rest of the city, the Ohio River came into commercial prominence in Steubenville after the founding of Fort Steuben in 1786, and it reached its pinnacle of success somewhere between 1831 and 1860, the peak when trade was up and down the river. And then, of course, the competition of the railroad appeared, which changed the game for commerce. Railroads still travel along the river, which is why Steubenville, which is on a natural floodplain, has two railroad lines running through it. The city's history shows that there was a robust waterfront culture on the Ohio River. So a great number of leisure boats, as well as trade barges and ships that moved industry both up and down the river once the invention of the steam engine allowed trade to be brought up the river as well as down. So transport has been at the heart of Steubenville's development, apparently, as well as the railroad. Steubenville's downtown is also bisected by what's being known as the Dean Martin Highway, which does an excellent job of getting people around, but in the process has made the transit zone an undesirable or even dangerous place to be. So it seems the thing that supports Steubenville for many years is now holding it back in a sense. We have some very interesting photos of this time. So if you observe these photos of a before and after of the north and south ends of Steubenville, as you can see, this is the amount in 1954, the amount of development and housing development, and then this is our north end in 2020. Pretty dramatic shift, just generally just from a bird's eye view, and the shift is even more felt by the people who live there. In conclusion, this change is one of the avenues where Strong Towns enters the narrative. We believe mostly that making places easier to get around does not necessarily make them more desirable to visit. In fact, the opposite often occurs. We want to make Steubenville a place where people want to be, all of Steubenville, not just the pristine historic neighborhoods or the genteel western suburbs, but the city's original downtown as well, which has suffered from a bad reputation for some time. In the 2013 Steubenville Comprehensive Plan, the city of Steubenville set out a vision for the city, which promoted 7 big ideas. I'll list them now. The first is improve the image of Steubenville. The second is promote healthier lifestyles. The third, reinvest in first-rate neighborhoods. Celebrate Steubenville city and culture. Enhance community connectivity and mobility. Leverage Steubenville's natural resources and qualities, and promote partnerships. With regards to neighborhoods, the comprehensive plan promotes redeveloping what we call the first-rate neighborhoods in the city's east that have seen the most vacant lots and dereliction in the last 50 years. The plan also recommended promoting infill developments and having a variety of housing types to encourage small families and single occupants to move in without taking up a huge amount of space. All of this should be possible without affecting the historical character of the neighborhoods. But what about the west? Well, it seems that the city cannot grow anymore in a westward direction unless we want to swallow up Wintersville, which is currently a village, which is enjoying growth in its own right. Instead, the comprehensive plan suggests promoting better connectivity within the city, including the western reaches, creating a hierarchical street network with some routes earmarked for quieter forms of transport such as bikes and wheelchairs, and enhancing the character of the central spine road of Sunset Boulevard will go a long way to connecting the disparate parts of the city. So will infill development Not skyscrapers or massive apartment complexes, but small stores and amenities that will reduce dependency on cars all the time, and instead encourage walking and cycling with others in order to get essentials and luxuries as well. But enough from us. We've told you what we know about Steubenville from reading about it and researching it, and in archives, in old and new archives. But we really want to hear from all of you what you guys have you experienced in the city as residents. And so this is where we'd like to break into our discussion.